Hey everyone, welcome to week 77. Today is day 3. Today is Wednesday. This is our third day of our ongoing Interpreting Color Week. Remember, we're working from black and white photographs and we're trying to be super expressive with color. Let's see how we do today.
Okay, let's get started. This is day 3. This is Wednesday. This is our third day of our ongoing Interpreting Color Week. And for today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I think for the first 2 days, we've embraced the liberty, the possibilities that have been granted by acknowledging that because we're working from a black and white photograph, we can generate whatever color relationships we want. That doesn't mean that they're all going to be effective. I think with yesterday's painting, where our springboard of sorts was a reflection of Monet's almost unequal colorist sensibility, we tried to turn our perception upside down. I mean, we're not doing anything that hasn't been done before. We are just, again, embracing the fact that we can construct color relationships that are not really based on what we experience when we observe nature. So yesterday I spoke a little bit about trying to combat this naturalist instinct. And this is a very particular thing, especially for the people that work somewhat academically and that also work from life. If you work from life and if you have this, pseudo-classical training, you are always prompted to be faithful to nature. We've spoken about how we have to deal with the weight of representing nature responsibly. And that responsibility generates a rule set in your perception. You already know what to expect when you're painting something. And that may be a good thing, and it may also be a pretty bad thing, I feel, sometimes. It can be a good thing in the sense that you are recognizing patterns in nature, and you're trying to fine-tune the essence of those patterns. So when you're painting skin, any tone of skin, under natural light, you already kind of know what to expect. You can predict what sort of temperature the shadows are going to be, and you could predict what temperature the light is going to be. And if you do enough varied paintings, you create recipes in your mind because you have recognized that a lot of conditions do repeat if you do enough of those paintings. So I guess that's a good thing because you become a very proficient and effective painter. You recognize what works, why it works, and you're able to translate it efficiently into painting. And again, those are not bad things. I mean, many, many painters strive and work their whole lives to achieve those very things. But I also feel that many times when you rely upon past experiences, you become a little bit lazy because you run the risk of not looking at things anymore. And this has certainly happened to me. I have seen the same light conditions so many times that I can equate them to a formula in my palette. And I know it works because I've seen the resulting paintings that come out of that reflection. So I think that the risk is high when we realize, okay, this person's skin tone under this particular lighting condition can be solved effectively with these variables in my palette. I know that if I paint with these color mixes, I'm going to make an effective painting. And I guess that at some point, the drive to be efficient trumps the willingness to always be vigilantly observant. And I think that that's something that we really have to be aware of. So I like, and again, this is my path, this is my journey, I like to believe that there is something really wonderful about looking at anything with fresh eyes. That you look at something as if it was the very first time you looked at it. I think that that's a really amazing way to try and paint. Now, you can't reset your brain every single time. Even if you try to train yourself to do that, it's almost impossible that your brain is not constructing knowledge upon past experiences. We experience growth as a human being because we learn from those experiences. So it's almost impossible to say, I'm going to see things every single day, every single time with fresh eyes. Honestly, that's a really nice sentiment, but it's something that's probably physically impossible to do. But you can try to do that. You can put aside the things that you think you know. That's why I always refer to those things as the knowledge that we think we have, that we convince ourselves that we have. So you can try to put those things aside, or maybe not put them aside, but always question them. Always question them. Don't understand them to be these, monolithic truths. if you are constantly questioning what you learn, that's not a bad thing either. You're not going to have the solid foundation that painters that I described with the first example have, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a solid painter. Maybe you have to be comfortable with redefining yourself every time you paint, and that's not a bad thing. The thing is, that lack of consistency sometimes is puzzling to, let's say, observers, or something that gallerists or curators, they don't really appreciate, because what they want is unity in expression. If you're going to say something, you can say it consistently through 20 paintings in a show. That's what people like. That's what 95% of painting exhibitions look like. And that's what sells, consistently sells. So there's a lot of other variables pushing us or unconsciously training us to believe that that's the way we should approach painting. But again, there's not one way to do things. There's never one way to do things in any of the arts. For me, it's really interesting to try and understand every single painting as a new starting point. I know that that's impossible, but I like the idea. I'd like to believe that, I can train myself to understand that that's a very exciting place to be. It makes for the act of painting something that's exhilarating. And I love that feeling. I love knowing that every time I sit down, I'm painting a new experience. And because it is a new experience, it has the capability of teaching me a ton more than if I just reiterated through paint the knowledge that I have, the knowledge that I treasure. For yesterday's painting, what we were doing was just kind of fending off this naturalist instinct that we possess when we look at nature so much. And we were just trying to generate color relationships that wouldn't particularly make sense under a naturalist philosophy. Although under naturalism, if I take yesterday's painting as an example, the sky can be a yellow-green for sure, and foliage and grass can be an orange-red. That's totally conceivable. Each one of those things can obviously happen in nature. Now, the fact that they happen at the same time, I think that that's where we're breaking some of the naturalist laws, let's say. But it was really fun. Yesterday's painting was a really nice excuse to grant myself the permission to just say, okay, this color doesn't make sense here, but I'm going to put it there. And I'm going to try to make the painting work. And I realized that if I followed the values that were in my photograph, values are so powerful. They are so strong, and they help so much with the unity of an image that they can actually hold together colors that don't make sense. It is that amazing. That's the true power of values. So I relied upon being faithful to those values, responsible with the depiction of those values, and I just translated them into colors that don't really make sense, but I tried to make them make sense within my painting. They don't have to make sense in nature. They have to make sense in a painting, because a painting is not nature. A painting is a painting. So the rules are set within that painting. That's what's most important about painting, and sometimes we forget about that because we are so subjected and we're so almost like blinded by nature that we don't realize that what we're making is a painting, and it has to survive and be understood as a painting. For today, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I found this photograph of Sargent painting. And at first I thought, I'm going to try to do a Sargent painting based on a photograph of Sargent painting. And I told myself, okay, I'm going to embrace my brushier side, and I'm just going to be super Sargent-y with this, as much as I can be. And then I thought, well, I don't know if that's the knowledge that I want to extract from reflecting upon Sargent. I think that that's a very one-to-one thing. If you look at a Sargent painting, and all you come up with is the fact that you have to paint like Sargent, that wasn't really useful. I don't think that that's profound observation or profound reflection of a painter's work. I think that that's a very superficial way of acknowledging somebody else's work. So when I always think of Sargent, I think of something that is beyond my reach. His painting is not only beyond my reach, it's beyond millions of painters' reach and millions of painters that are still going to be painting in the future. I think Sargent has an ability that I'm not going to say it can't be surpassed, but I'm going to say that it's simply extraordinary. It is something that will happen only once in hundreds of years, and millions upon millions of people in this universe are going to be painting, and they're never going to be able to get close to what Sargent did with his own painting. And like we've talked before, that's totally fine. Accepting those truths is fine. I don't care if you like Sargent's painting. I don't care if you're sensitive to Sargent's painting. But if you're a painter, what you have to admit is that beyond his subject matter, maybe you don't like these high society portraits, but beyond that, his ability and his sensitivity was so absurdly acute that it is something that's simply not going to repeat itself. So every time I look at Sargent, I think this is not right. Being this talented just doesn't really feel human. There's billions of people on this earth, and then there's this one different human being. And instead of thinking that that human being is an expression of everything that is possible within us, I sometimes think like, no, that's actually alien. That person is not behaving like the rest of the billions of human beings. So when I was thinking that, I remember what they said about Paganini, that people believed that he had made a pact with the devil because, how could a human being play the violin like that? He played without sheet music. He would memorize everything. He could play up to 12 notes per second. I mean, ridiculous things. So that's why people called him the devil's violinist. And I thought, you know what? I'm pretty sure Sargent made that same deal with the devil. And that idea crept into my brain, and I was like, why don't we paint this? So what I thought was like, let's use some of those earth reds that I have. And I have a very nice Old Holland red ochre. And I also have a very nice Old Holland transparent red oxide. That's going to be my red base, because if you're going to paint the influence of the devil, you got to have some red undertones. This is going to be like the perfect foundation for what I thought was going to be super cool, which is accents of quinacridone magenta. In my mind, this is not going to make sense because magenta, even though, it's part of the red hue, it just feels so far from those red earths that they should be analogous, but I don't know if it's going to work. And in my mind, I was chickening out a little bit, and I thought, no, I kind of have to try to put magenta somewhere else in the painting, because if I have this one spot of magenta, because I thought that the portrait would be the one moment where I would put that magenta accent, I was thinking that's going to be too much. That's just going to be like a bullseye in my painting, and nobody's going to see the rest of the painting, even though that portrait, that head, is going to be about, I don't know, not even 5% of the painting. Even though it's a small area, it's going to unnecessarily grab your attention so much that you're not going to want to see the rest of the painting, even if the rest of the painting is 95% of the painting. This is probably going to be way too unbalanced. So I thought, okay, we could be sentimental about this and say painting does happen in the mind, does happen with the eyes, the brain, but it also happens with the hand. What if I make a second note of magenta in the hand? That's going to aid me into not making just a single bullseye, just a single moment of the painting that grabs your attention. And I thought, okay, that's going to be a little bit easier to manage. And maybe, and again, this is the part where I kind of chicken out a little bit, maybe I can sneak in a little bit of that magenta mixed in with the transparent red oxide in some other areas of the painting, just to prepare yourself for that introduction of magenta. I was still very scared, and I also realized if I want to use the full power of magenta, it being like a semi-transparent color, I have to use it as a glaze almost. I have to just, lay it transparently and then not bother it anymore. I can't add white to it. I'm not going to add other reds to it to try to make it brighter. The brightest you're going to get a transparent color is when you lay a transparent layer down and your ground is light and that brightness can filter through that transparent layer of color. That transparent saturation is something that opaque colors are going to have a very, very hard time competing with. I don't have opaque colors in my palette that could compete with that saturation. So for an alla prima painting, that's the best that I could do. Now, the brightness is also going to be a little diminished because moleskin paper has actually like a yellowish tone to it. So it's not a bright white ground. This is nothing close to making like, let's say, a traditional gesso ground that is, the brightest thing that you could ever paint on top of. So I thought, okay, I have to lay this down. I have to hit my drawing. I can't for the life of me try to correct this drawing. So there has to be a very high level of commitment with this shape. I have to just put it down. I have to frame it with my darker background, and then I'm done. If I hit it, I hit it. If I miss, I miss. I could have been able to correct it a little bit, but it wouldn't have had the same impact and the same kind of purity, let's call it, if I did it as a committed decision. So there was a lot on the line on this painting. I think it's a painting that survives in a small, fragile area. I think that if I had pushed a little bit more, I think the painting wouldn't have worked. If I had respected the shapes too much, then the painting would have felt disjointed. So trying to find a balance so that the painting would feel cohesive was very, very tough. I mean, it's a very simple painting, to be honest. It's a super, super simple painting, but the decisions have to be so direct and you have to be so committed that if it works really well. And if it doesn't work, it just looks and feels like a failure. So I'm happy to say that I think it works. I really do. This is not something that I usually do, but I'm kind of proud that I pumped myself up so that I could understand the responsibility that was inherent to the decisions that I was making in particular areas of the painting. So I had to be very respectful of my drawing, and I had to be super careful that through painting, I wasn't going to ruin that drawing. And like I said, I think it works. I think it works. I have to give two amazing artists, shout outs that are the people that are in the back of my brain when I'm doing this very simple exercise. One is obviously Alex Kanevsky. I think Alex is amazing. He's an incredible painter. Ever since I saw his paintings for the first time, they have been ingrained, etched in my brain. He is, in my mind, one of the best contemporary figurative painters out there. I absolutely adore his work. And the other painter, and he's been doing amazing, amazing gouaches lately, so please check his Instagram, is Lars Elling, who is incredible also. I love his paintings. There's obviously empathy between what Alex does and what Lars does. Both of their work, this kind of deconstruction of figurative work, this pseudo-iconoclastic figurative painting, I know that that doesn't quite make sense, but it kind of does in my mind. I really I think it's a painting that was super big, maybe 12, 15 years ago, but I still feel that it's a very powerful painting. I think it's kind of naturalist figurative painting, being completely aware of the 20th century, permeated by all those teachings. As a person that loves the whole of painting, every single extraordinary example of painting, the fact that I can enjoy every single moment of painting, every single exercise of painting, every single effort that has been done through painting, I love that. So because I am a figurative painter, I just love the sort of work that Lars and Alex does. Obviously, I'm not putting myself at the same level as they are. They have developed their work through years, and this for me is just an exercise. I'm not trying to claim what they do as my own. I'm just, super excited that I can channel what I love about them and hopefully use it effectively during this week. So that's going to be it for today. Join us tomorrow where we finish off this week. I think tomorrow we are going to do something a bit more analogous and just to have fun with the choreography of shapes and distortion that we can generate through the painting. That's going to be tomorrow. I'll see you guys. Love you. Bye.